a lot of misinformation. So a lot of what, Kristin and I try to do is just simplify things, just untangle things and make it a little easier for people, and realize what the real answers are. And you really need people who are actual subject matter experts. And that's why I'm so glad to get to talk to you, because, I'm trained in college admissions, but I don't do it full time because I tutor kids. And so always happy to have someone who can just answer questions. And I think that's something too that I think most people are, but we're happy to just, like Kristin and I are always happy to just answer questions, have a free consultation, whatever, just to help people figure things out and then work from there.
Right. And it doesn't matter where they start, depending on who they're talking to. I mean, we will all get you to the right people. So definitely chime in. And guys, just a quick update. I had a streaming on College Planning Untangled and not on Kristin Clark Coaching. So we may have a couple people trying to get in. So just know that I made that adjustment just a little while ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we're using new technology, and with that always comes a learning curve, which we always love, but we're loving this streaming platform that we found. So
yes, it's wonderful.
So, one other thing I'm going to put in the chat, we're talking about throwing out all these things that people need to do when they're planning for college. And what I wanted to do is make sure that we provided our college planning timeline that we use that includes all the steps that you need to take just to simplify that college planning process for everybody. So feel free to text timeline, the word timeline, to 71441. And you can get a copy of that college planning timeline and take a look at it. So
that's great. Yeah, my students have found that very helpful. Just having that, list of steps to take, and even, the few things you can do to get thinking about it sophomore year, but then junior year, you need to get going on it, right? So many people suddenly realize it's fall and they haven't done anything in fall of senior year. And that's too late to start. Yeah.
It is. At that point, they are behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Yeah.
But for all those parents that are juniors right now, you're doing just fine. Yeah. And you can get all of this done. So we want to make sure that you feel very comfortable that, you're not behind the 8 ball. You're in good shape so far. Well, and I'll tell you what, I will go ahead and get started and talk about the idea of figuring out a career path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where it should start, right?
Well, it is where it should start. And I'll tell you, when I was going through the same process with my 2 boys, one of the things that I noticed is that our college consultants, our high school counselors, everybody was helping our kids get into college. And that was the main focus. And, as I sat back and tried to figure out how to help my boys, one of the things I realized is that we were missing a really crucial step in all this. It's easy for us as parents to do the check boxes, right? It's like, I know I have to take the tests at a certain time. I know I've got to get those college essays in because they're telling me I have to have them done by this date. But what we're missing is really kind of taking a look at this whole child. Okay. They're a junior in high school, senior in high school, and, really figuring out why they want to go to college. What's the purpose? And, I hear all the time, college isn't just about figuring out a career path. And I agree with that. There are the different things. There's learning critical thinking. There's really adulting and having these great experiences being on your own. That's still in kind of a place where it's a little bit safer, right? We're not just throwing you in the deep end. But at the end of the day, college is also helping you set up for a career and to figure out that career path. And that's really where I think college planning starts. I want parents to really just think about not just checking a box, but to step back a minute and just think about and helping their child think about, why are we going? What's the purpose? Yeah. And having those conversations early. Yeah. So, and what happens is if we start with figuring out why the kiddo wants to go to college, they're going to be so much more aligned with the major that they pick. They are going to have a lot more focus, more confidence walking into school. And, with all the craziness that's gone on in our world in the last couple of years, we could use a lot more confidence and a lot more focus, right? With COVID and all these things happening. And then ultimately, too, they're going to have more of an appreciation for their college education because they know why they're going, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, and, I always throw this out there. I like the facts around college planning and just what happens to our kiddos. 30% of students that go to college do not return after their freshman year.
Wow.
It's a huge number. And I really feel like a big part of it is because they're going without this concept of, I know why I'm here. And our kids know that this is expensive. They're not confused by the fact that college plan or going to college is kind of an expensive endeavor, right? And I guess the last thing I want to talk to parents about is, when the result of all this is not only for the child, but also for the parents. Number one, the kiddo is going to do better in school because they know the end goal. They know what they're shooting for, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to have more purpose. They're going to enjoy their time in college. And I'm a huge proponent of let's have fun. This is a lot of learning, a lot of adulting, a lot of changes. But during that, let's have a good time too, and really enjoy those 4 years. We all have fond memories of going to college. And I think, sometimes we lose a little bit of sight of that it is about growing up too and having fun. But they're also going to have a more purposeful experience when they go, again, because they have an idea of why they're there and what they're trying to get accomplished. And then for parents, I would tell you financially, this is huge. Because students that go into college with having an idea of their career path and what they want to major in, they're going to get out on time. They're going to get a 4-year degree in 4 years versus our kiddos that go in and take 5 years or 6 years, that starts multiplying.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the cost of that starts multiplying. So, for parents, just encouraging you to have these conversations with your kids about what is the end goal. And starting at that, I think is, my biggest takeaway for today that I'd like to impart. So what do you think, guys?
Well, I think it's just amazing how, it's easy to miss a lot of these things. I have a lot of students who come to me and, they say, okay, if I can get 1 more point on the ACT or 2 more points or whatever, then there's a defined scholarship I can get. Or I can get in-state tuition. But a lot of times they don't realize that those scholarships or whatever only apply for 4 years. And suddenly a 5th year, if you change your major a couple of times, and I changed my major several times, that then, I was still able to get out in 4 years because I was lucky to have AP credits that helped. But otherwise, I would have ended up stuck there for another year, and my scholarship wouldn't have applied, and that would have really, really been an expensive hit,
And it is, and we'll go back to facts. Only 40% of kids graduate in 4 years. So,
my husband and I, we have 4 kids, and I'm like, listen, here's the thing. It's called 4 years and frame it. We're looking towards framing that diploma. That's what we're going for. And that's all we're in for. We've been very upfront with them that we've worked really hard to save for their college education, and we're here for them, but it's 4 years. And one of ours is an engineer, and he said he was in danger potentially of failing this one class this semester. And he's very bright, capable, works really hard. And I didn't want to add additional stress, but I was like, son, you got to pass that class, because he said if I don't pass it, I'm going to have to
prerequisites
a semester. And I was like, that's not really going to work. It's not, but anyway, a lot of that too, Kristin, is finding the resources for kids to learn to advocate for themselves. So that's something during junior and senior year. If you can force yourself to advocate for yourself, find resources, because colleges want you to graduate in 4 years, and so they have resources there to help with tutoring that you've already paid for in your tuition. That's included. I don't call that free. I call that included. And for kids who are brave enough and courageous enough to say, yes, I need help, and I need it early on in the semester, go to the writing center, go to the, especially for the large intro classes, they absolutely have tutoring available for those at nearly every college.
Yeah.
So pay attention to what you learn in orientation, and pay attention to the maybe your RA who's a year or two ahead of you. Ask about resources to help you so that you can finish on time. So that is
that's a really good point, because I don't think enough students take advantage of that.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've seen too is that a lot of times they're not walking in with the right questions.
Mhm.
I'm talking more with the counseling department versus
Yeah.
I think you're right. You've got opportunity to get help with your writing and to get tutors in each of your classes, and you should take advantage of that. And I think those people have more time to spend with the kiddos.
Yes.
But when we're talking about the counselors, you're usually getting about a 15-minute time frame to talk to them about classes and all those good things. And we need to make sure that we're arming these kids with the right questions to go in,
Yes.
so that they can get some of the help that they need on the college credits and getting their major and all of that stuff. So I think that's too where an opportunity for a parent to kind of step in and maybe help coach their kid a little bit to ask the right questions when they get that 15-minute time slot, so they take advantage of all the opportunities.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something I think, with respect to what you do, Kristin, helping students figure out their, what college major and stuff, that students will come in, thinking that their counselor is going to help them select a major. And they don't do that. You come in and they say, okay, what major have you picked? And you can't say, oh, I want to talk to you for half an hour about what I might like. No, they want to know, tell me what you've chosen. I will tell you, help you pick out the classes or whatever. That's it.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, you got to walk in having done that prep, and I know you've got classes coming up, right, Kristin, that for, people who want to go ahead and get that process started, because junior year is a good time to do it, right?
Junior year is absolutely a good time to do it. And just for parents, it's really the first year that I'll take students, because, freshman and sophomore year, quite honestly, I think to them, it feels like a million years away before they're going to be going up to college. Right. So yeah, junior year is the best time, because I have 6-week classes. So it's a class that they meet me once a week for 6 weeks. And at the end of that, I'm not expecting any student to go, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, right? It's really more about having them open their mind to the fact that, number one, they do have the answer within them. But they do have to think about it, and they have to understand the process to go through. One of the favorite things that my students enjoy in the class is I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. So we do the Strengths Finder assessment. And what that does for students is it helps them understand the types of activities that are going to make them happy. It's the activities that they truly have a natural talent in these activities, and they enjoy that. And if they can include those in their work, it's going to make that work much more meaningful and much more fun for them. So they love that piece of it. And it really is kind of that starting that journey of really understanding who you are and looking at that whole person. And it's so fun, because I also take some of my students through what I call the family strength session, and we do strengths with mom and dad and the student. And they really all three figure out that
that's
we are built differently, right? That there's a reason my kid shouldn't be a lawyer like I am, or shouldn't, be a real estate agent like I am, because they're just built differently. So it's really eye-opening, and the kids love that part. But yeah, and Bobby, I could go on all day long talking about strength. So
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
This kind of, if I can interrupt for a minute, Kristin, this kind of goes along with it's really important junior year. A focus that I have working with juniors and seniors in their college search and application process. One of the main components is the main Common App essay. And everyone has to do that. I've never had a student in the 10 years I've been working not have to complete the Common App, which also, again, the Common App essay, there's one main essay. And the thing that they are most looking for, the reason that essay exists, is for colleges to get to know you better. So most of your application is objective information. It's a lot of statistics. It's like, your transcript. It's what you've participated in. It's a lot of black and white data, but this is the student's opportunity to share. Who am I? What matters to me? What do I value? And that really goes along with what the things that Kristin's working on with them as they're exploring themselves and who they are and potentially who they want to be. So one thing I love to remind juniors is start paying attention to yourself when you have a moment of, oh my gosh, I just learned this about myself. I'm actually good at organizing events with my friends. That is significant. Colleges are looking for students who have skills like initiative, organization, that are risk takers. They're not afraid maybe to try something new. So if you are aware, and you have to learn to be self-aware. You have to train yourself. I mean, I think for some people that comes naturally, but most people, self-reflection is not something they do all day. So exploring things with Kristin and paying attention to yourself, who you are, who you want to be, that's really, if your essay can reflect some component of that, it helps colleges tremendously in understanding who you are and what your goals are. So that's something for sure that, that doesn't take any money. It just takes some time and thought and reflection. Even asking your family members, what are 3 words you would use to describe me? That tells a lot. Ask your best friend that. Those are significant. Those can be significant conversations, which can then translate to an excellent self-reflective essay on your main Common App.
And Kathy, I love that you bring that up, because the one of the things that I love about the Clifton Strengths report that you get after you take the assessment is it gives you the language to be able to explain that. Because a lot of times people say, I know what I'm like, I know what I'm good at. But the reality is when you ask them to explain it, it becomes really hard, right? And the Clifton Strengths report actually kind of gives you those words to be able to say, like for me, I've got a need for speed, by the way. I love getting things started. I love moving quickly. I love bringing other people along with me and getting them to start things quickly and not overthink. But it gives you that kind of that more of the words just to put behind that. And you brought up one other thing is not only noticing what you're good at, but remembering the examples. Because when you're talking about essays, for sure, it's like, let's provide some examples so that, hey, when I did this, I felt really strong and I felt really good about it, so that you can use it as an essay topic. And Bobby, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, this is fascinating because, I mean, students have never been asked to write an essay about themselves before this point. So they don't have any language for it at all. And also, this is really interesting because, the college admissions process is about evaluating a student's college readiness, right? And so your GPA, if your GPA is high, then that is an indicator that you're college ready. And if you have joined and stuck with a club for all 4 years of school, that indicates that you are more college ready because you can do a thing and stick to it for 4 years, not leave. But what the other piece is, they want to know if you are emotionally, not just intellectually, college ready. And part of that is, have you ever only just stuck with the same 4 people and never ventured outside your comfort zone? Because in college, you're going to get exposed to a whole bunch of stuff that you are not comfortable with and have never experienced before. And they want to know that you are, when you said adventurous, Kathy, it's like, adventurous as in, will you meet new people? Will you talk to them? Will you leave your room? Will you join clubs, right? Because that's what makes a college successful. And so students don't realize that that's what their essay needs to do, is in one way or another explain that you're going to be interested in meeting new people and finding out new ideas. And the key to doing that is saying something interesting about yourself. But man, it is hard to get students to say something interesting about themselves, which is why I try to refer students to people like you, because generally when I look at a student's essay, it's always the same 3 topics that they always send me. And I always have to start by saying, No, you can't use any of those 3 topics because every essay already sounds like that, right? Is that
Yeah.
your experience?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mhm.
Well, and Kathy, let's talk about the essays.
Yeah.
Let me put up your information.
Oh,
So
you're fine. Yeah.
yeah. So what are like the biggest 3, I guess, things that kids do that they shouldn't?
Yeah. So what popped in my head first, and I'm going to go with it, is don't let your parents have access to your essay. I mean, parents. So I don't mean to be offensive, but what happens to us as adults is we change the voice of a 17-year-old. We're just naturally inclined. And honestly, I work with a lot of capable and smart kids. It's not the vocabulary that parents are changing; they're literally changing the tone, and it has to sound like a 17-year-old because that's again what they're looking for. So I love when a parent says, oh, I've trusted you with this and I'm not diving into their essay. That's I feel like I can tell when a parent has had access to the essay, and it doesn't typically benefit them. It really changes it and it changes the voice and the tone. So that's the first thing that popped into my head, but it's really for the students' best interest. And so we want to maintain their level of writing and their tone. I mean, I have had some students who are, I would say, below average academically, and it can be complicated for how much grammar you correct, or how you have to. It needs to be authentic. It needs to match up with the rest of their their application. But essentially, kind of going back to what I said before, the most important thing is you have a choice to decide, what do I want colleges to know about me? That's your space. Whatever you want them to know about you, with confidence. I love when you were saying, you know, you decide on your story and then come up with an example to support it. So if you decide, I really want them to know that I take initiative, show us how you've taken initiative in high school. Where have you done that? If you want them to know that you're brave, that you're a risk taker, write the story. And when I say write the story, I literally mean the first, maybe not quite third, but maybe the first 25%, you're setting it up and taking the reader there with you. You want that admissions counselor to go to the beach with you, to be able to see, feel, hear whatever that location looks like. Kind of what Bobby was saying, some of the generic things that, you hit the winning home run, or you got the touchdown and you just love being on a team because you learned so much. That's too generic. I'm not saying you can't write about a sports team that you're on, but it has to be unique to you.
Yeah, so because really, to your point, Kathy, it's not special. There are lots of kids on teams. There are lots of kids that hit a home run. There's lots of kids that do this. It does have to be meaningful and that somebody's going to remember.
Yes. You really want the admissions office to say, hey, did you read that essay about the kid who blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You want to become that example if possible. But the other thing is you should be authentic and you should be really proud. I had one student, he wrote an essay about rock collecting, which honestly to me sounds a little bit boring for my interests and what I prefer to read, but it was fascinating because he spoke about each place he collected them and why it was meaningful. And I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. It really drew me in. Whereas again, typically rock collecting would not necessarily do that for me, but it was his unique experience. And I think sometimes parents worry about it not being almost professional enough, because it can be, I'm really careful when I say this, it can be written in more casual conversational tone. It does not have to be like a textbook. And so that's important. That's kind of what draws the reader in as well. So
yeah, and Kathy, I'll tell you, even for me in my business, I was in corporate America for 25 plus years, right? I had to beat the corporate speak out of me. If that speaks to parents at all, it's like that corporate speak isn't going to work on a website talking to parents about kids going to college. It just isn't, so, for parents, I know I would have done the same thing with my kids. I would have been in there, corporating it up. And that's not the way they talk.
That's exactly it. And it's okay for it to be, again, it still has to be grammatically correct, written well, but casual is really the term that I'm like, that's acceptable. That's, that's permissible, and that works well. And honestly, another thing is some of the most mundane activities, some of the routines, like a kid making a smoothie. Maybe someone made a health choice a choice at some point to eat healthier, and they focused in on making smoothies. Literally going through the motions of making the smoothie, and now what that's done for themselves physically and emotionally. That's your essay. That's
a great essay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember a couple of years ago, there was an article in the New York Times titled "How I Know You Wrote Your Kid's College Essay" or whatever.
Yeah.
And, it said like, this essay has the word henceforth in it. Like, a high school kid didn't write it. And then I started kind of paying attention to that when I look at students' essays, and you can even tell which sentences the parents wrote, which sentences the kid wrote, particularly because the part the parent wrote has 2 spaces between the sentences, and the part the kid wrote has 1. And that was mentioned in the article as well. And it's like, just don't touch it. Don't let adults, do any editing. Like, you could maybe let them read it, but don't let them edit it in any way. Right.
That's right.
It's funny, but that was the other thing I was going to say is, students, I think, get stuck because they think their essay topic has to be interesting or exciting. And I specifically steer them away from that, which is like, you need to be interested in it. But really, the more mundane the topic, if you're interested in it, that's the best essay to me.
Yep.
Like one of the famous ones is the student who described themselves as a pizza with different toppings. Like, who cares, right? Yep. Or, one of the ones, I had a student who got into Yale on an essay that was about how his piano probably felt when he wasn't practicing it as much as he should. And it was written from the perspective of his piano. And it was a beautiful, heartfelt, very cheesy, but it was true. And, and I looked at it, and I helped him edit a little bit and said, okay, take out this stuff about, I was away studying really hard for my AP test. They don't care about that. Yeah. But the feelings and emotions of you and your connection to your piano, like, that's amazing. That's what they're looking for, is because that nobody could have written that essay and made it sound genuine except that student, So that's it but it's so hard for students to connect with the thing that makes them feel genuine. And this is what both of you are bringing up that's so interesting to me is, Kristin always talks about how when she's trying to get a student to figure out their strengths, you just wait for their eyes to light up and they lean forward and they get excited. And you can see me, I'm getting excited and animated talking about this topic because I find it so interesting, right? And suddenly I'm very engaged in shit. That's when so if you can, and that's, I guess, what you probably, Kathy, are like asking your students is like, what do you get all excited and light up about, right? Write about that, even if it's rock collecting. Right. That's
right. Yeah. And another thing, sometimes I'll say to a student, if your essay, just as an example, if you had it typed up and you left it in a classroom and your name was not on it, anyone that you've been in high school with for more than a couple of months should be like, oh my gosh, this is Bobby's. This has to be Kristin's, because it should just, you should be oozing out of that, your aura, what you're about, what matters to you, all of those things. But the hardest thing is thinking of a topic and really being comfortable and confident. But that's exactly it. Finding something that matters to you, that makes you excited. And I encourage students to do that. So when I'm working with students, the main essay we knock out in June, right after junior year is over. That is the very first thing I focus on with students for the application process, because after junior year is over, we're shifting obviously to the busy work and the administrative work of applications. And I lead them to getting their essay draft, done and edited. That's the very first thing we do before diving into honestly, the specifics of the Common App, that's just time consuming, just the actual typing. But the essay is really nice to get done on the front end. And then, quite honestly, so many colleges have some additional supplemental essays and short answer questions that they'll have to do a little bit later. So there is more writing to come, and it's really nice to have that one main thing finished on the front end. So that's another thing I encourage students. Just one little piece of advice. Start focusing on that main Common App essay as soon as junior year is over.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Just get started on it. The other thing too that I thought was interesting is students have said, or I've suggested this to students before sometimes, which is if they're having trouble writing it in that casual tone that you're talking about, is try imagining or even try actually telling this story to a close friend and then write down whatever you said to them, right?
Mhm.
How would you describe yourself? Explain who you are to your close friend. What language would you use? Use that language. Is that something that
Yes.
you've used before?
Yes. What I've said to them is imagine you have a story you want to tell a good friend and you're like, hey, let's go meet at Panera or Starbucks.
Right.
And as whatever you're sharing with them, you should be typing that out. Yeah. So that's exactly what I say. Start with it in that language, and that just tell the story. Because I kind of call that tapping it out. I'm like, once you have your idea,
Yeah.
it should take you 30 minutes. It's a max of 650 words. It's a page.
Yeah.
So if you're going to belabor something that is literally typing one page, if that's going to throw you back for a couple of months, you need to really think about whether or not you can go to college. I mean,
Right.
that's a task that you can face. So, yeah, that's exactly right. I say the same thing, just as if you were telling the story to a friend. Type it exactly like that.
That's excellent. I mean, all of these pieces of advice, I mean, they seem very natural when you hear them, but they wouldn't occur to people.
Nope.
And they just need to know these things. And that's why, to me, it's so valuable to talk about these things. And, to really get to where you want to be, they should be working with somebody like you if they can, right? But just these pieces of advice right here would get people a lot of the way down the road. And that's a big part of this is I want to just share pieces of information that will keep you from going down the wrong path, right? Which is just writing that essay about how you scored the winning goal and then, or how summer camp changed my life, and
or all the places
right.
I've gone to visit, or it's like
I went to a foreign country and people are different, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's interesting. And okay, so why don't we talk for just a few minutes about the stuff I do, because that ties into what y'all are talking about. And literally, I just have a couple of things to say, which is you probably need a test score to go along with all this, right? Now, a lot of schools have gone test optional or test blind. So if you were applying to the University of California system right now, you don't need a test score on the SAT or ACT. You can't use one. But for most other places, you do. And the thing is, if you're the valedictorian, if you've got a top 10 GPA, well, maybe you can apply to all test optional schools, right? But if your GPA is anything other than perfect, you're probably going to need a test score, right? Unless you're dead set on the University of California system, and you're probably going to need pretty good test scores or pretty good GPA to get in there. And so you got to work backwards from these goals you're talking about. In order to start writing your essays, you got to know what colleges you're going to apply to. In order to know what colleges you're going to apply to, you need to know your GPA and test scores. So you need to have a test score in hand that you're happy with and that represents you and your GPA, because it's not about everybody doesn't need a near perfect score on the tests. You just need a score that represents your academic achievements, what you've learned, that correlates with your GPA or is better if possible, right? And you want to have that in hand by June of your junior year, by the end of your junior year, so that you can spend the summer visiting colleges, choosing colleges, narrowing it down, and have all the information you need. So if you take that into account, well, you can't count on one test day being your best test. Everyone should plan to take the test, SAT or ACT, at least twice, which means you probably should take your first test no later than March or April, right? March SAT or April ACT, or even earlier if you can, right?
And by the way, sign up early and don't do the Clark plan, which we did, and sign up late and spend extra money on taking tests every time.
So, right. And if you sign up late, you might have to take it at a location that's not favorable. Might have to pay extra for, late registration, all that. Might have to be on a waiting list, and that's stressful. And so then you probably need to prepare for at least a few weeks, probably more, before your test,
Mhm.
So that puts you at the best time to start preparing for the SAT or ACT is probably February of your junior year at the latest. A great time to do it is right now during winter break of junior year. If you have taken Algebra 2, or if you are currently taking Algebra 2, then you've got all the math you need
Mhm.
for the test. So if you were a sophomore in Algebra 2, you probably could go ahead and take the test, right? Although people's scores do tend to improve as their brain matures from sophomore to junior year. But as long as you're in Algebra 2, you're good to go. If you're taking Algebra 2, maybe you want to wait to take the test till March, April, June, as opposed to fall of junior year. If you've already taken Algebra 2, you could take them in the fall. But basically, a lot of times this tutoring process, if you take a class, you enroll in tutoring, you're going to end up, in a class that's like 10 classes, 25 hours. You're supposed to come every Tuesday night or something. Then your schedule interferes and you have to miss a couple of classes and things like that. You end up spending a whole lot of time, and it can be very effective. I used to teach for Princeton Review. It can be very, very effective depending on the teacher you have and whether you have the time to do that much work. On average, a student who does all of that goes to 10 classes, 25 hours of class, takes 4 tests, does a bunch of homework. On average, a student will improve about 3 points on the ACT or about 100 to 200 points on the SAT. So what I do in tutoring is I start with the student and say, here is a past, real, actual SAT or ACT. Take it at home. I have a proctoring app on iOS and the Android App Store where my voice will proctor the test and tell you when there's 5 minutes left and tell you when to stop, and also give you strategy advice. You take that test at home, then you meet with me, and we just review the questions you missed on that test.
Mhm.
So instead of, excuse me, each time we meet, today we're going to talk about geometry the whole time, right? Instead, we're focusing only on the questions you missed. That makes it way more efficient. And so what ends up happening is we review a test that probably takes 2 sessions. Your homework is take another real test at home that I give you. Maybe it takes 1 session to review that second test, right? And then take a third test. Your score is going up. You're missing fewer questions. Maybe we only end up reviewing 3 tests. On average, most of my students get to their potential, like highest score, to their goal score in about 5 or 6 hours of tutoring. And I think that is very unusual.
That is.
Compared to a lot of other tutors. A lot of students come to me and they've spent 25 hours with another tutor and their score has gone down, right?
Well,
And
Bobby, I think there's
so
a really huge point in all of this, and that is you're customizing it to that student, and you're not wasting
Absolutely.
their time. So they feel
Right.
like they're making progress, and they're willing to sit down with you, because I've seen a lot of programs where they want to take them as a freshman and teach them. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot on a kid that's going to school every day and trying to do other activities. So, I'm a huge fan of how you do this with kids, because I just feel like they feel like it's real, customized for them.
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing that ties together what all 3 of us are doing here is I treat the student as if they're already an adult. I say, look, your job is take this test, review it with me. Now, your job is take another test or take part of the test. If you don't feel like doing math today, then don't do math. Do reading. Just do something and then come back and review it with me. And you don't meet with me every Tuesday. You meet with me when you've done more work and you're ready to review it. And if you want to improve a lot quickly, you need to meet with me and keep working as quickly as possible. Let's meet a couple of times a week and be done with this in 3 weeks, right? Instead of this 3-month-long thing where by the time you're at the end of it, you've forgotten all this stuff at the beginning. I'm trying to respect the fact that students are really busy. They're way more overscheduled than we were when we were in high school. And we thought we were busy back then. We weren't, right? Students today are overwhelmed. And so it's all about get in there, get in and out, get done. Because as far as I'm concerned, the number of Saturday mornings you want to give away to the test companies, you don't want to be spending all these Saturdays doing that. So get ready, practice enough that you are consistently getting a score you'd be happy with. Go get that score, move on with your life, right?
Yeah.
And that's it.
One other thing I would add to that is it's also helpful for students if you have a couple of schools that you are pretty confident that you're interested in, find out what their average scores are and make that your goal. So I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
it's an excellent idea, for a student that says, oh, my goal is to get the highest score possible. That's not the same as my goal is a 26 on the ACT. That's a different goal. And if you're working towards a 26 and you're working with Bobby, and I love how you said, Bobby, that you are focusing on what they missed, because I always tell students, be really proud of what you've mastered, acknowledge what topics and what content you have mastered. And one thing that they can do if they didn't have the privilege of working with you is take a green highlighter and the questions that they got right and that they were so confident and answered quickly. Because honestly, the pacing of those tests is a real challenge for many students.
Oh, for sure.
Highlight those in green, just the number, not the whole thing, but just the number.
Right.
And look, and so each time you take another practice, either section or full test, try to keep improving that percentage of green questions, and your progress will be right in front of you. I do have a question for you, Bobby. This comes up a lot when I start working with families. And I do have a way that I do this, but I'm very curious, since you're the professional on testing and tutoring, how do you help a student decide which one to take, ACT or SAT?
Oh, man. So this is really interesting because the answer is different today than it was 10 years ago and 5 years ago and 2 years ago, which is unusual. Usually it was like in the past, what you did is just, here's a past SAT, here's a past ACT. Take them both and see which one you do better on, right? Then College Board has had, which is the makers of the SAT, College Board has gotten a lot of flack over the past few years. They stopped using ETS to write their tests and started writing the tests in-house 5 years ago. And they are doing a poor job of writing the tests. So the scoring scales have been very out of whack. The test has been unpredictable, and unpredictable is really bad.
Yeah.
So the ACT has not really changed anything and is extremely predictable. So for the past 4 years, the answer has just been the ACT is better for 95% of students, purely because it's predictable. But the difference is now the tests are more similar now than they ever were. So and it seems like over the past 6 months, year, the SAT has worked out its kinks and gotten to become predictable again. So now you actually do have to think about it again. The SAT is very tricky and dense. And the most important things is that the SAT has a reading passage, at least one, that's from more than 100 years ago, which makes it almost impossible for a high school student to read with any speed, right? If any of us would have difficulty reading and parsing an Abraham Lincoln speech, right? And and the SAT also has the math section that does not allow a calculator. And that is super intimidating and time pressuring to a lot of students. The ACT, on the other hand, is much more straightforward and not as dense. The ACT reading section is written at an 8th grade reading level, while the SAT reading section is written at a college reading level. That's a huge difference. So the ACT is much more accessible and direct and straightforward and allows a calculator on the whole math section, which makes the ACT on paper an easier test. But the ACT is significantly more time pressured than the SAT. So if you give a student a current SAT and an ACT, they will probably do better on the SAT at first, because on the ACT, what's happening is they are doing great. And they're like, I'm getting all these questions right. And then they say, oh no, there are 5 minutes left and I'm only halfway through the section. And they have to leave a third of the section blank. The tutoring process or just good strategies. If you buy the Princeton Reviews SAT and ACT prep books, they are great too. If you just read those, they will work, right? If you learn the strategies, then it is easier to fix time pressure problems. using strategies than it is to fix, can I read an Abraham Lincoln speech? You can't easily fix that, right? So as soon as you fix the time pressure problem, the ACT becomes a significantly easier test. So I steer currently almost all my students to the ACT, but there's always, every student's unique. And so to sum all that up, if anyone wants, I will send them past SAT and ACT. Just message me, go to my website and fill out the contact form, say you'd love to have a test. I'll send you a test, and then just have your student take the reading sections and the math sections of both, and then see what the difference is. Okay, that's my very long answer to that question, but does that help?
Oh, that's tremendously helpful. Yes, that comes up a lot here in the state of North Carolina, where I am. Juniors, our tax dollars have paid for all public school juniors to take an ACT in February. And so I love when a student really selects the ACT, because that can count as one of their 2 or 3 administrations.
Right. And it's not a Saturday you have to give away.
Yeah. And also I have found a majority of my students really perform well on that state administered test. Some people say, oh, it's because ACT wants the state to keep using them, so they make it a little easier. I'm like, I don't care what the reason is.
Yeah, who cares?
Getting scores that people are excited about, that's the goal. So
that's funny.
And then another, I was having a conversation with someone in the test prep industry, really trying to focus on the appropriate test for one student I was working with who deals with test anxiety in addition to pacing. It was a lot. And this was at a time when there wasn't as much access to test optional schools. So now that's opened up. But anyway, it's funny, I've been doing this a long time, and she said, well, here's the thing, because he was quite weak in math. So for a student who math is not their strength, the SAT is 50% math. Right. ACT is 1/4 math. That's a big deal.
It's a huge deal, and so many people don't focus on it. And even more interesting, right now, I have had a lot of students this year who have big deficiencies in math that I have not seen before. And I think that's because COVID, maybe there's something about math is harder to teach over Zoom or something.
I'll tell you what it is. The students told me that they stopped doing their schoolwork, in 2020. So I have had the same thing. Parents have called me saying my kid is so far behind in math, and I was like, well, the current teachers can't go back and teach that year, so it's a big problem in the state of North Carolina. Yeah.
And you can still get better in English and history and science without doing your homework. But math, if you don't do your homework, you're dead. Right.
Well, not only that, it builds upon each other too.
And it builds on each other.
Information that was building. And so in North Carolina, at the start of COVID, your grade could not go any lower than what it currently was. And so they all just stopped doing it. Just didn't do any. They just
quit. My gosh.
Now, anyway, so that's really what happened here.
Yeah.
But those gaps are real. Like, that's for real.
Yeah. So what I've been doing with all those students is they come in and they've got a 22 or an 18 math, but a 24 English, reading, and science. And I say, okay, here's the deal. You're going to move your English, reading, and science to a 32 or higher. Yeah. And then, and we'll get your math to like a 24. And who cares? Average those 4 together. That's a 31. And I've had a bunch of students do that, where they got stuck at a 24, 25 on math, but they got into the 30s on everything else. Who cares? You can average them together. On math, on SAT, if your math is 100 points lower, your score is 100 points lower. It is a huge, huge deal, because it's what you said before. On the ACT, you can choose to maximize your strengths and say, well, I'm good at these sections. I'm going to go get those to in the 30s. And you can hide that weakness by averaging it together. The SAT can't do that. It is so important, and it's so positive feeling for the kid to say, math doesn't matter. I can focus on these other things that I'm really good at. It's so good. That's why I love the ACT so much.
The other thing I want to bring up and remind parents is, if you know which college you're trying to get into, and you go to their page that talks about finances and scholarships and all that good stuff, it will basically tell you what SAT or ACT score you need to get certain scholarships. So I think for some people, it's like, I don't know, do I need a Bobby? Do I need, to hire this out? And I'd say that's a great way to figure it out is look
Absolutely.
at what do you need to get money off. And if you want a gun for that, if you think you can gun for it, then hire a tutor,
Mhm.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
now that they have those defined scholarship, information, like, yeah, it's really easy to calculate the return on investment. You spend $1,000 or $2,000 on tutoring, and you get an $80,000 tuition reduction. Yeah, that's easy,
it's a
easy to do,
no-brainer at
right?
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
All
Well,
right,
this has
guys,
been great.
we have 6 minutes left. Is there anything that you guys would like me to put in the chat or anything else that you'd want to end with? I put my class into the chat. So for parents, if you don't feel comfortable walking your student through and helping them to figure out a career path, I will tell you 98% of my class is about figuring out a career path, and about the major at that point, super easy. So it kind
Yeah.
of falls out of it. But if you don't feel like the conversation in your house is going to go as well as it would by using an external person, and that would be true for all of us, really, definitely reach out. I've got classes that start in a couple weeks.
Great.
Bobby, I included in there that, you will offer that sample test.
Absolutely. And if people go to my website, they can download my math strategy guide. That link is in there. And so, yeah, and just contact me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer questions. Have a free consultation. Just let me know.
Yes, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me as well. I have a free presentation I do in the spring for rising juniors,
Oh, nice.
giving information about what juniors should be focusing on, what needs to be accomplished junior year to be prepared for senior year. And I will offer those for anyone who's out of state. I will offer probably one or two of those via Zoom, so anyone can access that presentation. So I can get you on the mailing list for that if you're interested as well.
Excellent. Well, this has been great fun.
Yes.
It always is. Yeah. I love helping parents with this.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you all have a happy new year and a great holiday season and all that.
All
Yes.
right.
Mhm.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.